Welcome everyone. We are getting ready to add to our building in Revit. I'd like to just chat for a minute about the topics that our kind of reference textbook is going to be covering. And it's basically, we're going to learn how to place walls. We kind of already know how to do that from chapter 1 or from our first experience. How to utilize reference planes to serve as a reference piece of geometry for drawing a wall on top of. And we are going to add some interior walls. We're going to edit a wall join, and we're going to place some doors and windows. So there are some reasons that the textbook wants us to go through this. So placing walls, clearly when we're modeling in construction, the primary thing that we're doing in a building is, well, walls. Walls, floors, ceilings, and roofs. Not to overcomplicate things. Then in these reference planes, the textbook is going to take us through how to create a reference plane and how to use it. I want to highlight that it is nice to attach our walls to something like a reference plane if we're not going to use a grid. However, in every commercial project I've ever done, I've never found a time where I had to use a reference plane. So a nice feature, but quite frankly, I've just never used it. Then adding these interior walls, obviously a core common task, and it's going to come down to, again, paying attention to these wall planes or guides. And then editing these wall joins is a way to customize how Revit, quote, joins our walls. So nice to know, but again, something that just has never come up in any of my work that's actually needed to be done. So nice feature, hardly ever used. And then placing doors and windows, really quite honestly, gives us an idea of some properties of those windows specifically, and really helps us understand temporary dimensions a little bit better. So those are textbook topics. And of course, I would like to highlight more than just what's in the textbook. So I really want to force us to move quickly to understand the workflows that are going to help us in a more complex project, right? It is really difficult to start a simple building and then develop different habits as a more complex type of workflow comes into play. So right from day one, as we've seen, and then we'll continue here in week 2, I'm going to hit on this project browser management, and I'm going to continue highlighting the value of grids. And I'm going to do that in a way in these videos that I'm going to say is a backwards workflow. I'm actually going to follow the textbook and draw walls without any grids. And then I'm going to come in and put grids in later and show that we can work or the value of grids anyway. And the correct workflow would be to be putting our grids in ahead of time and then drawing our walls right, snapping right to the grids. But it's nice to show it both ways. Then modifying views to show only what needs to show. And this is a really common task inside of Revit and something that the textbook literally just never covers. And there's quite a few techniques, and we're going to start to cover those. And then, of course, we're just going to add more sheets, and we're going to place these new views on this sheet for our second week. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So to get started, let's take a look at where we want to be when we finish. So I am going to just kind of flip over to Bluebeam here for a second. And this is the outcome that we're looking for when we're done with these sessions. And I guess one of the first things I want to highlight is obviously the building gets a lot longer, and we are going to need some more grids. So I'm going to right now I think we have A, B, and C, so we're going to need to change those grid heads, and then we're going to need to add an AB way out here, and we're going to add some horizontal grids as well. But let's go ahead and do the modeling as the textbook asks us without those grids. So we're just going to kind of follow along with the textbook, sort of. And you guys will get to know me, and you're going to find that I'm not necessarily a good follower. So I may choose slightly different workflows than is in the textbook. Okay, so let me break away right away. If I am looking at where we're supposed to start, we're supposed to work in a view. I'm going to navigate to what I consider my modeling floor plan, level 1. So I don't need to mess with any dimensions. And we're supposed to immediately start to draw this reference plane. Well, I know that the final outcome of where I'm headed is a drawing sheet that has these two views on it. So if that's where I'm headed as a finished project, I know I need a new drawing sheet right away. I'm going to go add a new drawing sheet. So here's the standard size. I'm going to click OK. Revit gives me this A102. I want to highlight to everyone that there is a sheet naming convention, and it always starts with a prefix of a letter. The prefix A stands for architecture, and then the sheets can progress up either as 101, 102, or sometimes it's 100.1, 100.2, and 103.1 and 103.2. A lot of good reasons to do that, but something to talk about later. So I have this sheet, and then I also know that at some point I'm going to want a CD level 1 view to place on sheet 102. Okay, I'm going to prepare that now. So here's my level 1. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm now going to rename it, and I'm going to use this CD level 1 week 2 because I already have a CD level 1 and I need to differentiate between the two. So there's my new name. And now I need to move it up to this CD category. So with my view selected, I come over to my floor plan types that I have created, and I'm going to say, no, I want it to move from floor plan type to CD floor plan type. And it moves up. And because I see level 1 and level 1 week 2, and by the way, this is going to happen week 3, week 4, week 5, I'm going to rename my first one and add a week 1 suffix to that sheet name. Okay. I go back to my A102. I know this week 2 view is going to go on my drawing sheet. I'm putting it on the drawing sheet. It looks like it's going to take up quite a bit of space. And I'll just click it in, and I've got a view. Okay. So now that means to me that I can either double click and work and build my geometry here on CD level 1 week 2. That's one window looking back into model space. I'm going to close that. I could double click into CD level 1 week 2 here on the drawing sheet, but I'm not going to do that. But it's just another window looking into model space. What I'm going to do is my constant workflow is if I'm creating geometry, I'm going to use these as like these master views. So I'm going to double click on level 1. This is this 3D modeling level 1. And here's where I'm going to build my geometry. And then once I've done that and I want to start doing some dimensioning, that's where I will go back to the drawing sheet and work in an annotation. Put my annotation into that view on the drawing sheet. Okay, so we're ready to start doing some modeling. The textbook asks us to create a reference plane, and it asks us to snap to a midpoint. So the beauty of Revit is it may be really hard on the screen to see, but if I hover over anywhere near the midpoint of the wall, then I get a midpoint snap. And the textbook tells us that. It's a really straightforward method. So at this point, before I do that, I'm simply going to confirm that I can see what I'm snapping to. And so we've just touched on these view resolutions in person to person in class. For just about any project that you're working on, fine view resolution is probably the best place to be looking at a model. Many exceptions to that, but certainly as we're beginning, we always want to use a fine resolution. Notice that the look of the wall changed, and if I zoom in, I can see multiple lines now. And notice they all have different line weights. So as we're here in the video, I want to highlight that this is how this wall is going to print out on the piece of paper, assuming I'm using fine view resolution. I can view this on the screen differently. I can toggle a command up here on the top line with it is a thin lines toggle. So I'm going to toggle that right now, and you can see what's on my screen completely changed, and line weights are simply not visible anymore. They still print with a line weight, but they're not visible to me on the screen. And I will say that when I am modeling, I frequently like to have my line weights be turned off. Okay, so I'll zoom back out, use my reference plane, get my midpoint snap. Yeah, I was getting kind of a funny snap there. It almost looked like there was two of them. And I got to tell you, when I see something I don't expect, the first thing I'm going to do with that is I'm going to zoom in. So there's my midpoint snap, and then zoom back out and draw this line out past the building, something like the textbook shows us to do. The textbook also tells us that we have some grips, and I can drag this line a little bit longer. Great, done. I will do the next two reference planes different methods. The first one was that we want to create the command again in our options bar. Choose that we want a 15-foot offset. And instead of drawing the line, we're going to pick some existing geometry. A really nice tool. And wherever we're in our draw, modify toolbar, this pick line option is always going to be an option here. So this is a great thing to use. So I'll click this, and I simply approach the reference plane from the top, and it offsets to the top. I approach it from the bottom, it offsets to the bottom. I will approach from the top and click, and I have my next reference plane. I also can select this item and simply copy it and come down and say I want to copy it 15 feet. I got a new reference plane. So there's always multiple ways to do it. Don't be afraid of moving copy and thinking about these basic things. All right, so we've done an intro. We've just done a really quick, hey, I'm going to start drawing some walls coming out of this left side. Let me close this subchapter, and we'll open up a new subchapter and get started on building walls there. Hope this is helpful, and we'll see you then.